Silence after a breakup can feel like your only form of control. When your heart is torn and your emotions are running wild, staying silent can seem like a way to regain power, to show strength, to make the other person wonder what's going on inside your head. But the truth is, silence is only powerful when it comes from intention, not reaction. Too often, people use silence as a way to manipulate or test their ex's feelings, hoping that the absence will make them miss you. Yet, that kind of silence doesn't heal or attract, it only keeps you trapped in emotional limbo. Silence rooted in fear or desperation has a completely different energy than silence grounded in peace and self-respect. When you go quiet because you're scared to say the wrong thing or because you're waiting anxiously for your ex to notice your absence, that silence becomes heavy and painful. You check your phone, replay old conversations, and live in constant emotional uncertainty. You're not growing, you're just hiding behind stillness, using silence as a mask for the pain you're afraid to face. But when silence is a conscious choice, when it's about giving yourself time to reflect, rebuild, reconnect with your purpose, it transforms into strength. True silence says, I'm not avoiding you, I'm focusing on me. It's a period of self mastery, not manipulation. It's when you take your energy back from a situation that no longer deserves to control your peace. You stop needing closure from someone else and begin to create it within yourself. That's when silence starts to attract because your energy changes. You're no longer seeking validation, you're radiating calm confidence. People can sense that even from a distance, and the irony is when your silence comes from power, it starts to make noise in their mind. They begin to wonder why you're not reacting, why you're so composed, why you're not chasing. That's when curiosity replaces comfort and attraction starts to rebuild naturally. But that kind of silence can't be faked. You can't pretend to be detached while secretly counting the days since you last spoke. You can't act strong if your every thought still revolves around them. The universe doesn't reward pretense, it rewards growth. And real growth takes self-awareness, emotional honesty, and time spent doing the hard inner work. When you use your silence to become better, to improve your mindset, your health, your emotional control, you shift from silence that hurts to silence that heals. The most powerful silence is peaceful, not punishing. It's not meant to make someone feel guilty. It's meant to remind you who you are without them. It's about coming back to your center, rebalancing your emotions, and learning that your worth doesn't depend on anyone's response. Because when silence is a strategy, not a struggle, it changes everything. You stop waiting for text. You stop analyzing their social media. You stop needing to prove anything. And in that space, you rediscover clarity, the kind that lets you see the relationship for what it truly was, not what you wanted it to be. That's where real power lies. In understanding that silence is not the weapon, it's the mirror. It reflects your emotional maturity, your strength, and your ability to stay grounded no matter what happens. When silence becomes a form of self-love instead of self-defense, you no longer use it to escape pain. You use it to transform pain into wisdom. So if you choose silence, let it be for the right reason. Don't use it to wait for them. Use it to grow for yourself. Because the moment your silence starts coming from peace instead of fear, that's the moment you reclaim your power. And that kind of power doesn't chase, it attracts effortlessly. Time is often called the greatest healer, but that's only true when you're actively using it to heal. After a breakup, silence and time can seem like the perfect remedy. You tell yourself that if you just stay quiet long enough, the pain will fade and things will somehow fall into place. But silence without reflection isn't healing, it's hiding. You might convince yourself that you're doing better because the days are passing, but deep down, nothing has really changed. You're just carrying the same emotions into tomorrow, hoping they'll somehow disappear on their own. The dangerous truth is that time doesn't heal what you refuse to confront. Healing after a breakup requires more than just waiting. It requires honesty. Honesty about your mistakes, your patterns, your emotional triggers, and even the ways you might have contributed to the ending. Most people avoid this because it's uncomfortable. It forces you to face yourself, your insecurities, and the truths you've been running from. That's why silence can become a trap. It gives the illusion of peace, but inside your mind is replaying every conversation, every fight, every what if. You're not healing, you're reliving. And the longer you stay in that unprocessed silence, the more those emotions settle in and define you. Healing starts when you stop asking, why did they do this to me? And begin asking, what can I learn from this? Because pain that isn't examined becomes pain that controls you. If you never take the time to understand your role in the relationship, you'll keep repeating the same patterns with someone new. You'll keep choosing the same kind of love, attracting the same kind of emotional chaos, and calling it fate. But fate has nothing to do with it. It's emotional inertia. It's the universe giving you the same lesson until you finally decide to learn it. When you're silent, it's easy to romanticize the past. Your mind filters out the pain and clings to the good moments. You start missing the person you imagined, not the person who was really there. This is how people end up stuck waiting for something that doesn't exist anymore. You tell yourself you're healing, but you're really just waiting for them to come back so the pain can stop. The problem is, that's not healing, it's dependency disguised as hope. Real healing means accepting that closure won't always come from the other person. Sometimes you have to create your own closure by making peace with unanswered questions. Silence should be a space for growth, not avoidance. It should be the time you spend reconnecting with your purpose, rediscovering what makes you feel alive, and rebuilding your confidence. Every day you spend in silence without self reflection is a day lost to emotional stagnation. You can't evolve if you're still anchored to the pain. Growth demands that you face your emotions head on, even the ones that scare you. It's in that confrontation that you gain wisdom, strength, and clarity. The truth is, time doesn't heal you. What you do with your time does. You can spend months being silent, scrolling through memories, overthinking every moment, or you can spend those same months building a new version of yourself. One path leads to bitterness, the other to peace. One keeps you waiting for someone else, the other helps you rediscover your own worth. The pain doesn't just disappear one morning, it slowly loses its power because you stop feeding it with attention and start replacing it with purpose. Healing doesn't happen in the silence itself, it happens in the growth you create within it. The longer you avoid the truth, the longer it controls you. But the moment you face it, everything begins to shift. That's when time starts working with you, not against you, because only when you confront what's broken can you truly begin to rebuild what's meant to last. When you stay silent after a breakup, there's a delicate balance between creating curiosity and confirming their decision to walk away. Silence, when done right, can spark intrigue. It can make your ex wonder how you're doing, whether you've changed, whether you've moved on. But when silence drags on without growth or purpose, it begins to send the opposite message. Instead of mystery, it becomes confirmation. They start thinking, he's still the same person I left. What was once an opportunity to rebuild attraction turns into proof that their choice to end things was right. The line between attraction and indifference isn't measured in words, it's measured in evolution. Silence on its own doesn't create attraction. What creates attraction is the change that happens during that silence. If you disappear only to sit in the same emotional place, your absence loses meaning. People are drawn to growth, to energy, to transformation. If you go silent and come back the same, there's no curiosity, no shift in perception. But when your silence is spent becoming better emotionally, mentally, physically, that's when your absence starts speaking louder than any words could. It's not about showing off, it's about genuinely becoming someone whose energy naturally commands respect and attention. Your ex doesn't miss the version of you they left, they start to wonder about the version of you they no longer know. That's the real purpose of silence, to create a contrast. If your silence leads to a stronger, calmer, more confident you, it changes everything. The person who used to overact now responds with calm. The one who used to chase now moves with purpose. That shift doesn't just make them curious, it makes them reevaluate everything they thought they knew about you. But that only happens when you truly grow, not when you pretend to. The biggest mistake people make during no contact is using silence as a waiting game. They think the longer they stay quiet, the more likely their ex will miss them. But silence without progress is just distance without purpose. Over time, that distance starts to validate your ex's belief that the relationship is over. They don't see the change, they don't feel your new energy, and so they assume there isn't any. It's not the length of your silence that matters, it's what you do with it. Imagine two people going silent after a breakup. One spends weeks wallowing, replaying memories, feeling sorry for themselves. The other uses that same silence to rebuild, hit the gym, learn new skills, focus on purpose, and emotionally reset. Both are silent, but the second one's energy shifts. That shift becomes visible in their posture, their confidence, their tone when they eventually interact again. That's the silence that creates curiosity, the kind that says, something's different about you. Your absence should make them question, not confirm. It should make them wonder if they made a mistake, not reassure them that they were right. And the only way to make that happen is to let your silence transform you. Because in the end, people don't miss the version of you that was emotionally reactive or insecure. They miss the calm, grounded version who seems to have outgrown the old story. When your silence reflects growth, it naturally reopens emotional curiosity. But when it reflects stagnation, it closes the door completely. So if you choose silence, let it be a silence filled with movement. Let it be the space where you rewrite your energy, refine your boundaries, and rebuild your value. Because real attraction doesn't come from words, it comes from presence. And when your presence changes, even your absence becomes powerful. The goal isn't to make them regret leaving, it's to become someone who no longer needs to be chessed or explained. When you do that, your silence doesn't just create curiosity, it becomes undeniable proof of your evolution. Silence can begin as strength, but if you're not careful, it can quietly transform into pride. After a breakup, it's easy to tell yourself you're being strong by not reaching out, by not showing emotion, by staying in control. You convince yourself that silence is your power, that you're winning because you haven't texted or called. But when that silence is driven by ego, it stops serving your healing and starts feeding your pride. What begins as self-respect can quickly turn into stubbornness. And in that stubbornness, you risk losing something deeper, your emotional maturity and your ability to connect with vulnerability. Many people confuse pride with strength. Real strength is peaceful and secure. It doesn't need to prove anything. Pride, on the other hand, is fragile. It's built on fear, fear of rejection, fear of appearing weak, fear of losing control. So you stay silent not because you've moved on, but because you're terrified of being the one to care more. You start playing games with time, waiting for them to break first, waiting for them to feel the absence. But love isn't a scoreboard and silence isn't a weapon. When it's used that way, it becomes destructive. The relationship might already be over, but that pride can keep you from ever finding real closure or peace. Silence rooted in pride is often louder than the words you never said. You replay moments where you wanted to reach out, where you felt something real, but stopped yourself because your ego whispered, "Don't look desperate." Yet deep down, you're still attached. You're still emotionally invested. The silence is just a disguise, a wall you build to protect your heart while pretending not to care. But the truth is, pride doesn't protect you, it isolates you. It keeps you from growing, from expressing, from evolving beyond the pain. It turns your healing journey into a cold war that no one wins. True confidence doesn't fear vulnerability. It knows that reaching out or expressing emotion doesn't take away your value. What matters is your intention. Are you doing it to reconnect with clarity and strength or to beg for validation? There's a difference between desperate communication and honest communication. One comes from weakness, the other from maturity. But when pride takes over, you lose sight of that difference. You let silence go on too long, and instead of rebuilding curiosity, it turns into distance that feels permanent. The danger of letting silence become pride is that time keeps moving while emotions harden. The longer you hold on to ego, the harder it becomes to reconnect, not just with your ex, but with yourself. You stop allowing love in because you're so focused on appearing unbothered. You start believing your own fade. And eventually, that fade replaces authenticity. What once was silence for self respect turns into a habit of emotional detachment. That's when people start losing touch with their empathy, their softness, their ability to love deeply again. Silence, when used wisely, helps you heal and reflect, but when you cling to it out of pride, it traps you in the same story you were trying to escape. You can't move forward if you're still trying to win the breakup. Real healing comes when you can look at the situation with compassion instead of competition, when you can acknowledge your emotions without letting them control you. Pride will tell you to stay quiet to appear strong. Wisdom will tell you that true strength is staying authentic even when it's uncomfortable. So, if your silence is turning a battle of ego, it's time to release it. Not for them, but for yourself. Let go of the need to win and focus on the need to grow. Because love isn't lost through silence, it's lost through the pride that keeps you from speaking when your heart already knows what it wants to say. There's a fine line between emotional detachment and emotional suppression, and most people cross it without realizing it. After a breakup, silence often becomes a shield. You tell yourself you're calm, that you've accepted everything, that you're over it. But deep inside, there's still a storm. You're not detached, you're just suppressing what you feel. You're pushing down the pain instead of processing it, and silence becomes your way of pretending that you're okay. On the surface, you look composed, even cold, but underneath, you're carrying unresolved emotions that quietly eat away at your peace. Emotional detachment is healthy. It's about accepting reality, understanding that you can't control another person, finding stability within yourself. It's what allows you to look at the situation without reacting, to observe your emotions without drowning in them. But emotional suppression is something very different. It's when you refuse to feel. When you numb yourself to avoid pain, it may seem like strength, but it's actually avoidance. You might not cry, you might not talk about it, but that doesn't mean you've healed. It just means you've buried the feelings deep enough to pretend they're gone. And the danger is what's buried alive never dies quietly. When you suppress emotions, they eventually find a way to surface through anger, through overthinking, through sudden moments of sadness that hit you without warning. You start to overreact to small things, not because they matter, but because your emotions are looking for release. You might even sabotage new connections, pushing people away before they get close because you're still carrying unhealed ones from the past. Suppression creates emotional baggage that silently dictates your behavior, your mindset, and even your ability to love again. The irony is that silence often encourages suppression. When you go quiet after a breakup but never express what you feel, your emotions have nowhere to go. You convince yourself that silence is maturity, that if you just keep calm and don't say anything, the pain will fade. But true maturity isn't about staying quiet. It's about processing your feelings in a way that helps you understand them. It's about learning from what hurt you, not denying that it did. The more you suppress, the more disconnected you become from yourself. And when you lose connection with your own emotions, you also lose the ability to connect deeply with others. Emotional detachment, on the other hand, is about balance. It's about acknowledging what you feel without letting it define you. You can love someone, miss them, and still accept that it's over. You can feel pain without losing your sense of self. That's real strength. Being able to experience emotion without being consumed by it. But to get there, you have to first allow yourself to feel. You have to let the grief, the anger, the sadness move through you instead of trapping it inside. Healing requires release, and release only happens through honesty. The truth is, silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means repression. And if you stay in that state too long, you risk becoming emotionally numb, not because you've healed, but because you've stopped allowing yourself to feel anything deeply. That numbness might protect you in the short term, but in the long run, it robs you of the beauty of connection, vulnerability, and love. You can't build something real while your heart is still locked behind walls built from unspoken emotions. So instead of hiding behind silence, face what's inside it. Allow yourself to feel, to reflect, to release. Because strength isn't about pretending not to care, it's about caring enough to heal. When you stop suppressing and start detaching with awareness, you finally find freedom. And in that freedom, silence becomes peaceful again, a reflection of acceptance, not avoidance. There comes a point when silence has served its purpose. The emotions have settled, the confusion has cleared, and you finally feel a sense of peace within yourself. That's when you know you're no longer silent out of pain, you're silent out of strength. When you've genuinely healed, something inside you shifts. You stop waiting for their message, you stop replaying old memories, and you stop wondering if they miss you. Instead, your focus turns inward. You start living again, not just existing. And when that happens, the idea of reconnecting, whether with your ex or someone new, comes from a place of confidence, not desperation. The difference between reconnecting with power and reconnecting with need lies in your energy. When you reach out because you're lonely or looking for validation, it never feels right. It comes across as forced, uncertain, and emotionally heavy. But when you reconnect from a grounded place, it feels natural and light. You're no longer looking for someone to fill the emptiness, you've already filled it yourself. You're sharing your peace, not searching for it. That's what makes your presence magnetic. It's not about chasing, it's about allowing connection to flow from authenticity. The danger of staying silent too long is that you can lose that sense of connection altogether. You become so used to being alone, so guarded by your walls, that vulnerability starts to feel unsafe. You convince yourself that you're better off detached, that caring too much is weakness. But that's not healing, that's fear disguised as wisdom. Healing isn't about avoiding love, it's about learning how to love again without losing yourself. Silence was meant to restore your balance, not erase your ability to connect. When you stay in silence past its season, it stops protecting you and starts limiting you. Many people make the mistake of believing that if they stay quiet forever, they'll never be hurt again. But love requires presence. It requires risk, openness, and emotional courage. You can't build anything meaningful if you're too afraid to show your hurt. The key is to approach connection with the new strength you've developed, the self-awareness, the calm, the emotional control. You no longer need to beg for attention or force communication because you've already built stability within yourself. That's the kind of energy that attracts effortlessly. When you're no longer chasing love, love starts finding you. If you do decide to reconnect with your ex, it shouldn't be about fixing the past. It should be about seeing if two evolved people can build something new. You don't reach out to relive old memories. You reach out to see if there's mutual growth and maturity. And if that connection no longer fits, you let it go with peace instead of resentment. That's what true healing looks like, being able to face what once broke you without bitterness. And if your path leads to someone new, you bring with you the lessons, not the wounds. Communicate with clarity, not fear. You give love from overflow, not emptiness. The silence after breakup isn't the end of your story. It's the chapter where you rediscover your voice. It's where you learn who you are without needing validation, where you grow into someone whose energy speaks louder than words. But you were never meant to stay silent forever. You were meant to emerge from it stronger, wiser, and more connected to your truth. So when the time feels right, speak again. Not to prove anything, but to express the person you become, because love, in its purest form, doesn't come from desperation, it comes from peace. And when silence has done its job, peace gives you the courage to open your heart again with strength, confidence, and calm certainty.